just wait a couple. Looks like more people are coming in too. I think so, yeah. Oh, right on. All right, I'm going to get started. So, as you guys heard, my name is Nicholas Sansbury Smith. I'm a science fiction author based out of Des Moines, Iowa. I'm a two-time Ironman triathlete, so I also like to exercise, which helps me a lot with my writing. And before I started writing full-time, I worked for the state of Iowa in various positions for about a decade. I finished my career there working for Homeland Security and Emergency Management, which is where I got a lot of my ideas from. I predominantly write post-apocalyptic fiction, science fiction, dystopian, stuff like that. So I basically went full-time 6 years ago, and today I'm going to talk about my journey. I'm sharing my story because I've always believed in helping other authors. When I first started, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that and how things have progressed over my career. So I first gave this talk several years ago, but so much has changed in the digital and print markets that I've really had to update this. The changes in publishing have been quite remarkable, as I'm sure everyone here knows. I personally believe the industry is going to keep rapidly changing, especially with audio. Audio is actually over half of my sales now, I think. And also with media and digital content, so things like graphics and books, or if you've seen the Kindle in Motion, stuff like that. I think in the next couple of years we're going to see a lot more of that type of content. So I get questions all the time about how to survive as an author in this constantly changing world of publishing. And my answer is to go hybrid. So what a hybrid author is meaning, I'm sure a lot of you guys know, but honestly I did not know when I first started. I talked to New York Times bestselling author Bob Mayer, and he was a hybrid author, and he told me that was the best route. So hybrid publishing is where you are an indie publisher, but you also may have traditional publishing deals, whether that's just in audio or in print and ebook like I do. So the really great thing about the changes in publishing right now, you're no longer restricted by the old rules of the industry. So you don't necessarily need a literary agent or a traditional publishing deal to get your story into readers' hands. Those can help, but they're not necessary, and I'm going to talk a lot about that today, about publishing, traditional publishing deals, and about agents, because those are some of the questions that I constantly get asked and things that I did not understand at all when I first started. So e-readers have helped fuel a revolution where an unknown author can become a bestseller and a full-time writer, like I did, honestly, it was almost like a fluke at first. That is the old industry. You don't see as many breakout hits these days due to the way the algorithms work on Amazon. I think it's just a lot more difficult to have, especially a standalone, become a bestseller and sell for a long period of time. What you guys have probably seen a lot of in presentations here is talk about KU and series, and I'm going to talk about all that as well because I kind of do both. Half of my books are in KU, all my self-published books are in KU, and half are with traditional publishers. So publishing has never been easier. There's never been a better time to be an author, in my opinion. So yes, it's competitive. Yes, the market is saturated, but I still do believe that there is a gold mine and the gold rush is still happening. So I already talked about what Bob Mayer told me about becoming a hybrid author. So that's exactly what I became by mixing and matching strategies that worked best for me. Over the course of the past 6 years, I found the right balance of freedom in both self-publishing and traditional publishing. So again, this discussion is about my experiences with those, with publishers, agents. I'm going to try to touch on movie, TV rights as well, and my experience with those, also foreign deals, and then if there's time, I'm going to go a little bit into marketing strategies, because I know a lot of you guys probably wonder how I got to where I am. So I will be throwing in a little bit of the strategies that I used. I won't have time to go into major details, but most importantly, I'm sharing my experience in the trenches of both self-publishing and traditional publishing, working with two of the top five publishers, Simon Schuster, Orbit, which is an imprint, the sci-fi imprint of Hachette, and then also Blackstone Publishing does all my audiobooks, and they're the top indie, the biggest indie audiobook publisher out there. So there's definitely a lot to talk about. I'm going to leave time for questions at the end. Let's get back to publishing. So my editor at Simon Schuster is now at Orbit, and she calls publishing the Wild West. As you already know, there's a lot of different roads you can take to success. What works for me and what I'm going to explain might not work for you. Sometimes when faced with the publishing deals or questions, there's not going to be a clear answer. So you might not know, for example, whether to query an agent about your manuscript, or whether or not you should just self-publish it. Or if you have an offer from a publisher or an agent, you might not know whether or not those are good deals. You might not know whether to go wide when you self-publish or to go to KU. You might not know whether to use a pen name for a different genre, or the list keeps going on and on. So in many ways, publishing is like playing poker for me when I come to Vegas. Usually in poker, you make bets based off the cards you hold. In publishing, it's very similar, at least in my opinion. So we often make bets on our stories without knowing what the outcome of our decision is, but we should, in my opinion, we should place our bets with several things in mind. So first off, we need to think about finding an audience. And we talked a little bit about this on a panel the other day. So understanding your genre, especially if you're self-publishing, understanding what the best covers look like, what the market looks like, what readers are picking up, and who the other authors are. So for me, I spend a lot of my day writing, obviously, and editing, but I also spend at least an hour researching the market, just browsing on Amazon, looking at other authors. I mean, I pretty much know every author in my genre that at one point or another I've seen their books. I know what's selling, and that really helps me. I'm lucky that I don't really have to write to market, because the stuff I like to write is popular right now. But for a lot of you guys, writing to market is probably one of the best ways to break into self-publishing. So I'm going to get started to where, before I landed the big deals, what happened with me. So basically, my publishing story does start with Amazon. I had an unpublished manuscript that I'd been working on for years. I thought about querying agents or sending the book, especially to a small press, which I'm really glad I didn't at that time. And I decided to do the least painful method, and I self-published on Amazon. That book was called The Biomass Revolution. I didn't really take my editing seriously. I didn't really take my cover seriously. I didn't take my marketing seriously. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, and it was a failure. So I'm the type of person that turns my frustration into work. And I spent the next 6 months researching the market and writing another book, and I realized what I needed to do. I needed to have a high-quality novel that had a great cover, that had a good blurb, and that was marketable. I also knew that I needed to build a brand, because it's very difficult to launch a book without having some sort of reader support. So whether it's reviews or having them share, it's becoming more and more difficult to do that. So my plan was to start building my brand while I was writing this book. My second book was called Orbs, and it came out 6 months later. And admittedly, I still had some major problems with that book, but it ended up going viral. And the way that happened was I put together a launch plan that included releasing a free short story, prequel short story, about 5 days before Orbs came out. And the short story, this was also 5 years ago, so I know a lot of you guys understand that free books are no longer as powerful of an entry point into a series as they used to be, because people are loading up their Kindles with free products and they're not reading them. Back then, it was part of my launch plan because it actually was, I mean, the click rate was a lot higher. So that short story ended up leading to sales for Orbs when I launched Orbs. I launched Orbs at 99 cents, and I put a pretty big bet into Orbs. At that time, I was still working for Homeland Security and Emergency Management. I was straddled with debt, student loans, I had a mortgage, I was a bachelor at the time, so it was me and my dog and a house and a lot of bills. But I believed in this book, and I put pretty much my entire savings into marketing this book. I also built a team of ARC readers that netted about, if I remember correctly, it was about 30 to 50 reviews within the first month on Amazon. I staggered those out. And I also used a lot of the ad sites back then. BookBub was around, but there was some other smaller ones too that used to be a lot more powerful than they are now. So I bought a lot of ad space through those 99-cent platforms and had those email blasts going out. And that's what helped propel Orbs to becoming a #1 bestseller on Amazon. It sold 30,000 copies at 99 cents in the first 4 or 5 months. And that's when I first started to realize like I could make this a career. I started getting inquiries from audio, agents, publishers, and even film inquiries, which I'm going to talk about all this stuff, guys, in a little bit. Right now, I just kind of wanted to share my marketing strategy because I think that even though this is a little bit older one, I have a newer one as well that I can share, and I think that will probably benefit you more than just hearing about my journey. So at that time, again, I was getting a lot of inquiries, and I had an offer in audio for, and another thing I'm going to say real quick is I normally don't talk about numbers. I don't like to explain how much money my books have made. I don't know why. I just don't usually do that, but for the purpose of the speech, I think it's good to show how I've kind of gone from small deals to big deals and to show you how that works, and also to show how to diversify your portfolio with self-published books and possibly traditional deals as well. So I am going to talk some numbers here. My first audio offer was for $500, and it was for Orbs 1. And I was negotiating that myself. I realized at that point maybe I need an agent, so I ended up signing with an agent who I've been with ever since. He's a great agent, and he was able to get me an audio deal for not only book 1, but for an entire trilogy of Orbs books plus short stories for $3,000 a piece. So back then that was a pretty huge deal for me. So not only did that happen, but Simon & Schuster came to us and wanted to buy the Orbs trilogy as well. So that was another deal that ended up coming together. And normally, from what I understand, an advance for a debut author in science fiction is going to be about $3,000 to $5,000 for a traditional publisher. Now that was 5 years ago. It's gone up. Audiobook advances have gone up considerably as well. I would say a normal advance for an audio these days, if it's already a bestseller and the company's coming to you, it's about probably $3,000 to $5,000. So this back then, that was a pretty great deal for me. Simon & Schuster offered, it was around I think $38,000 or $39,000 for the whole trilogy plus some short stories. So basically, I was getting paid $13,000 per book. Now, I'd already made about $30,000 on Orb 1. So why did I take this deal? I often ask myself that question. But at that time, it seemed like a really good deal because, 1, I didn't have a brand. And 2, traditional publishing is one of those situations where they're going to offer you a lot. They're going to tell you they're going to do a lot for you. And sometimes they do. And I honestly do feel like my traditional publishers have tried their best with my books. But for a newer author, it's really hard to break out in the paperback market especially. So I signed that deal because I wanted to see my books in bookstores. For me now, that's not as important, but back then it was. And so Orbs series was launched at New York Comic Con, and it seemed like a dream come true. Gillian Anderson was there, Scully from the X-Files. Her book was being launched at the same time by Simon & Schuster. So I got to meet her, and I got to go to New York Comic Con, and I was just over the moon. This was an amazing experience. And then the Orbs books, Orbs 2 and 3, started coming out, and they did nowhere near what I was hoping, on Amazon especially. They did go out to print, and I had a second print run, but I never earned out that advance. And this year, I ended up buying the rights back in January, and I relaunched that series. And I put out a fourth book that I'd always wanted to write, but I knew it wasn't the right opportunity to do it with Simon Schuster. So I put a fourth book out, and this was 3 years later, and I've made 4 times in the past year what I made my entire time with Simon Schuster by doing that on Amazon. So, and I'm not here at all to bash traditional publishers. I think traditional publishing deals can be great. I have another one I'm going to talk about here. But it all depends on where you're at with your career, and it depends on what your goals in publishing are. So some of us, our goals are simply to have readers read our book, and that's absolutely great. Some of us are here to make money, and that is ultimately what I'm here for now, because it's my job. It's how I put food on the table. So I always try to make the best bets. I always try to research things first, but I feel like I've made some bad deals still. But again, the industry has changed so much, it's hard to know what the right thing is and what the wrong thing is. So let me get back to what happened after the Orbs book. So like I said, they came out, they weren't doing too well. I had cut off my self-publishing income, so I no longer had that monthly paycheck. I'd been paid in advance, and what that advance is supposed to do is keep the author writing. So it kept me writing for a year. But at the end of the year, I was down to not very much in my savings account, and I realized this before then, but I knew that I needed to return to my roots in self-publishing and get something else out there while Orbs was being put out in the traditional publishing market. So what I did was I put out my second series. It's called the Extinction Cycle series. And I'd learned a lot over this time, not only about marketing, but also about writing. So my Orbs books, like I said, the editing was okay. It was better than my first book, but I didn't realize how important it is to make sure your science is accurate when you're trying to write hard science fiction. It wasn't hard science fiction, but the science was terrible, I'll admit. So my next series, The Extinction Cycle, I hired a biomedical engineer who's become one of my best friends, and he helped me with the science to explain how a virus can basically turn men into monsters. That was the whole pitch for the series. It was like World War Z meets the Hot Zone. And the Extinction Cycle, I'll talk about the marketing plan first. So again, this is when Orbs 2 and Orbs 3 were coming out. I put Extinction Horizon Book 1 up for 99 cents on pre-order, and I had Book 2 ready to go. So I had Book 2 up for pre-order as well. So basically when Extinction Horizon came out and started doing well, that immediately farmed readers to Extinction Edge, was the second book. And I had that at $2.99. So this series really took off as well, using my marketing plan that I had done for the Orb series. I had way more reviewers. I had a better idea of how to market. This was before AMS ads. So really that left, there was a lot of Facebook opportunities back then before Facebook ads got so saturated. So mostly what I was doing was Facebook ads, using the ebook newsletter sites, and then my own readers as well. And then also, I heard the BookBub presentation about authors and recommending your books. So another really thing that I've done is I've done a lot of networking over the years, and it really helps to connect with another author in your genre or multiple authors, not only to be a mentor, but also if you can get them to blurb your book and recommend your book, that's another extra piece of ammunition for your marketing strategy to help you bring you more readers. So I was doing that as well. So basically what happened was I didn't mention this earlier, but the Orbs audiobooks did not do well. So the ebook did not really do that well, the audiobook did not do that well, and the paperback did not do that well. So I did not have an opportunity to work with Audible after that, because they're not going to make an offer on a series that didn't do well. So my agent ended up getting me a similar deal for the Extinction Cycle that he got me for Orbs, so about $3,000 a book. That series exploded in Audible and ended up being #1 in the entire store in 2015. So the ebooks were selling, the audiobooks were selling, and I'm thinking, why on earth would I ever do a traditional publisher again? I'm making a killing on Amazon and in both ebook and Audible. But then I had this other idea for a story called Helldivers. Book 4 just came out 3 days ago, and it's actually #1 in science fiction and audio right now. It's been that series has been absolutely amazing performer in audio. R.C. Bray is a big reason for that. But back to, while the Extinction Cycle books were coming out, I wrote 6 of those within a year and a half. I was writing a slow burn project called Helldivers, and I was working weekends, nights, pretty much constantly, and I wanted to try to get another traditional publishing deal for that project. So I had decided that if I had one self-publishing project and one traditional publishing project, that would get me into print. And my goal was still to get into bookstores in a way where they were all over the shelves, or not all over the shelves, but you know what I mean. So I worked about a year on Helldivers, went through a pretty rigorous process. My agent, I think, sent me 3 drafts back. Finally, I hired a traditional publishing editor who was freelance. He helped me get the book, I think, ready to go. My agent pitched Helldivers. This was in 2015. He pitched Helldivers wide, so meaning to every top publisher there was. And typically when that happens, you're lucky if you get 1 yes, or you're really lucky if you get 2 yeses, and you're super lucky if you get 3 yeses. So I got 1 yes and 1 maybe. And I was just, we ended up, long story short, I ended up signing with Blackstone Publishing, the same audiobook publisher for the Extinction Cycle. So those guys are now into print and ebook, and they started in 2015. And one of their first books was Helldivers. They launched it at San Diego Comic-Con. We were out there for that. And that series really started off kind of slow, but I was using my same marketing strategy that I do for my, my KU books, and it worked for Helldivers, even though it's wide. We were lucky we got a BookBub ad, and that's really when it started exploding. Then we were really lucky because we got an Audible daily deal. So Helldivers hit #1 in the Audible store as well, in the entire store. So that series exploded in both ebook and audio. And so I started writing, basically I wrote 1 Helldivers book per year. So I wrote, they ended up signing a trilogy with me. So book 1 came out in 2016, book 2 came out in 2017, and book 3 came out in May of this year. And then I'll get to this in a second, but I just signed a new contract for books 4 and 5, and book 4 is the one that came out the other day. So I kind of got ahead of myself a little bit, but while Helldivers came out in July 2016, at the end of 2016, I got a call from my agent. He said, "Nick, you're not going to believe this." And I was worried because usually that's bad. But in this case, it was actually pretty good. So my editor at Simon & Schuster had moved over to Orbit, and Orbit wanted to buy my Extinction Cycle series. And I was thinking, no way, I'm not going to sell my Extinction Cycle series. The only way I'll sell my Extinction Cycle series is if it's a no-brainer that I can make more money in that deal than I would self-publishing. So at this point, the Extinction Cycle series is almost 2 years old. There's 6 books out. It's still selling pretty well, but I mean, those books were in the top 1,000, top 500 for almost 2 years straight. And they were starting to fall to the 1,000, 2,000 range. I was running out of bandwidth on marketing, didn't know where to keep going because at some point you saturate the market. Or, well, unless you do something drastic like change your covers and find a new audience, it's really difficult to keep a series going on Amazon. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how I kept, actually I'll do that right now. So the Extinction Cycle series, I kept going by utilizing Amazon's tools for KU books. For example, the Kindle Countdown deals. You're allowed every 90-day period that you're in KDP, which is, or I guess Kindle Unlimited now is what I would call it. For every 90 days, you're allowed either a 5-day free window for your book, or I think it's either 7 or 8 days for a Kindle Countdown. I usually just do 5 days. So you can lower your book price from, in this case, my books were mostly $3.99, $4.99. I lowered them down almost every time to 99 cents because that's where I'm always about quantity of sales. I don't really care about making money short term. It's about hitting the algorithms so you make money in the long term, and also about getting more readers and more reviews. So every time a new Extinction Cycle book came out, I would put book 1, book 2, book 3 on countdown for 99 cents. So that would get the series way back up in the rankings. A new book came out, there was excitement about that. And I'm doing that right now with my Helldiver series. So that's been my strategy for my series since Orbs. It still works pretty well. It's more difficult. I guess it's part of the reason maybe it's more difficult is because my newer series aren't as popular as the Extinction Cycle, but it still does work. So, and I do some marketing consultation on the side, and this is what I always tell my my authors that are in KU. It's a way to give your books fresh life, fresh blood. So doing discounts every 90 days, and again reaching out to sites like BookBub, running ads, just making sure readers see it. That's how I was able to keep my Extinction Cycle going for so long. I spend a lot of my time each week marketing and trying to keep my books alive. Some authors just go to the next book, and I wouldn't say I write slow. I've been averaging about 4 to 5 books a year, but I don't like to see my old books just die off without trying to do something for them. So that was how I kept my Extinction Cycle going. So let's see, back to the deal from Orbit. So like I said, Orbs offered Simon & Schuster offered about $39,000 for my Orbs series. Orbit came in and offered $350,000 for my Extinction Cycle series. And before that, Blackstone offered, I think it was around $200,000 for the Helldivers trilogy. So you can see how I went up. And I ended up taking the deal with Orbit for the Extinction Cycle because I realized the ebooks had pretty much saturated the market at that time, and they were promising to put the paperbacks out in wherever they could get them. And we got lucky. We got book 1 into Walmart for some time, and we got book 1 into the front shelves at Barnes & Noble. So I'm not sure if I'll ever earn out that advance, but for me, I believe that deal was worth it just because I got into the mass market in a way I never thought possible. I can't remember how many books have been printed now, but I do know I've sold over 100,000 copies with Orbit as of my last statement. So that was worth it to me. But again, I lost all my self-publishing revenue. So my monthly paycheck went way down to like a couple $100s a month. When I was used to seeing, like, at the height, over $30,000 a month. So I knew that, again, I was going to need to get a self-publishing series out there. So this all happened in 2016 and 2017. So at the end of 2016, I started writing a new series called Trackers, and I put book 1 out immediately in 2017, right before my Extinction Cycle books got taken off. Well, I had to take them down, and then Orbit put them back up. So I lost that revenue. Trackers started coming out in 2017. I put 3 of those books out, and Helldivers 2 came out, and Extinction Cycle 7 came out. So that was a part of the Orbit deal, was I would write a 7th book for them. So I had 5 books come out in 2017, plus some short stories, and that really kept my momentum going. So that brings me to May of this year. Blackstone Publishing offered me a 7-figure deal for 7 books, 2 Helldivers books, and then 2 other series that I'm working on now. And that deal is for audio, print, ebook, and also worldwide translation, which I wasn't sure about, but my books have been, the Extinction Cycle has all been translated into German, and it's really difficult to get foreign right deals when you're indie published, even if you have an agent. It's especially in science fiction. I know a lot of you guys probably aren't science fiction, but that is why I decided to sign the worldwide English rights away, because Blackstone would be then in charge of selling those rights. I still get, I think, 75%. It's still a really good rate when you sell your translation rights, but so that's where I'm at now. I'm working on those 7 books. Like I said, Helldivers 4 came out. Helldivers 5 comes out in May of next year. And then I have a another apocalyptic series I'm working on, and then also a space opera. So that's really my career in a nutshell. Now that you guys understand my journey, I'm going to talk about some of the other lessons I learned along the way. I'm going to try to get through this really fast because I do want some time for questions. Let's start with agents. I keep hearing that agents are dead. That's not the case at all. If you have a good agent, they're going to get you deals like, I would not be where I am today without my agent. Could I have made some of these deals on my own? Absolutely. Would I have gotten as good as rates? Probably not. And I probably would have screwed up on some of the contracts too. Even with a lawyer, most lawyers, even IP lawyers, don't always understand publishing contracts. So the question is, when do you get an agent? For me, I got an agent when I knew I needed one. If you have a manuscript you're sitting on that you want to go to a traditional publisher, then definitely start querying agents. Research the agents and make sure that you're not doing anything to piss them off, because oftentimes, like, I see a lot on Twitter, there's a very strict process on how to query. So that would be the first reason to try to get an agent if you want a traditional publisher and you want representation. The second reason to get an agent is if you're an indie publisher and you have a bestseller, but you don't have access into basically a gateway into traditional publishing with audio deals. Agents are going to have those contacts. They're going to be able to get you better deals. On basically what they're going to take is industry standard is 15% of each deal. But on the other hand, agents also, they pay you and they keep an accounting of things. And for me, I'm lucky because I absolutely trust my agent. I know there's bad agents out there, but I am pro agent if you can find a good one. And if anyone has questions about agents after this, or questions at all, you guys can come and find me. But I do feel like that's probably the question I get the most. When do I need an agent? And I would say the same thing that I'm going to say about traditional publishing. You only need an agent and you only need a traditional publisher when they can do something for you that you can't do for yourself. So that's really important. And I think I've tried to show that to you guys through this presentation on what my agent did for me that I wasn't able to do for myself. So let's talk publishers real quick. When do you get one? Well, again, indie publishing used to be where traditional publishers, especially some of the Amazon imprints, were picking up self-published titles like crazy. Now they're not really doing that. So that opportunity might not be there. Those doors are kind of closed. And also a lot of indie publishers that are making a lot of money, they don't want to sign with a traditional publisher for the same reason, some of the stuff that I talked about. But if your goal is to be in the print market, that's when you would want a traditional publisher. If you have a traditional publisher, it doesn't mean they're going to get you into the print market. We've had difficulties getting Helldivers into Barnes & Noble, or getting them to stock multiple copies of them. The extinction cycle was everywhere, but that is really when you need a traditional publisher, because as most of you guys know, creative space is gone now, but the print on demand through Amazon, rarely are you, unless you're like Hugh Howey or A.G. Riddle, you're not going to be able to get into Barnes & Noble. There is one bright side though. If you don't want to go traditional publishing and you have an indie bestseller, it's possible these Amazon stores are going to start stocking. They already are stocking the bestsellers. So that is one way. So Barnes & Noble might be gone in 2 years. It might just be Amazon stores. So it might be a moot point. But at this moment, that is why if you want a traditional publisher, it's basically for print, in my opinion, because the ebook rates suck and audio is, well, I'm talking print ebook. Audio, it's still good to have a traditional publisher, in my opinion. It's much more difficult to have a breakaway success on ACX. I'm kind of running out of time, you guys, so trying to think. I have a little conversation about KU versus wide. I'll make that real quick. If you're an indie author, I recommend going into Kindle Unlimited. I've had clients that want to do wide, and I personally can prove for my sales that it's so much more worth it to be in KU than to have your books wide, unless you're a super bestseller where your fans buy on other platforms. So I'm just going to keep it short on that. Again, the 90-day period, you can use the Kindle countdowns and stuff like that, and you still keep 70% royalty on a 99-cent book when you do that, so you are making better royalties. There's just a lot of benefits. Also, KU books get promoted more by Amazon. You're more likely to get a Kindle Daily deal, go into Prime Reading. My Tracker series went into Prime Reading. and it hit 8 in the Kindle store at one point overall. So did Extinction Horizon. I think that's the highest I ever got, but that was mostly because of it being in KU. I wanted to talk about building a brand but I think I've kind of already covered that. I will say that I have a street team, about 150 people, that helps me with reviews and helps me with launching my books. I have a fan club on Facebook. I have a Facebook author page, so there's about 2,000 in the fan club, 10,000 on the author page, a newsletter, and I'm also a partner in Discover Sci-Fi, and we built a newsletter for science fiction of 100,000 subs. And so those are kind of my go-to marketings. That's the brand that I've built. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and all that, but what I tell my clients is focus on what sells you books. For me, what sells me books is my Facebook groups, my newsletter, and again, the BookBub type sites, and I run a lot of Amazon ads now too. So those, I'm still running Facebook ads, but I would say Amazon has replaced those in terms of ROI and CPC rates. So, and that was my next thing I was going to talk about is ads, but I don't think I really have time, and foreign either. So let's see, film and movie. Helldivers was optioned for film. I can't really talk too much about that because the contract still is in legal hell, but this is something you absolutely need an agent for. I don't know anyone that has gotten a film option deal that wasn't screwed over that didn't have an agent. I actually do know someone that was screwed over for that reason. So you're going to end up paying 20%, but you're going to get a much better deal. The thing about movie options, I've had tons of inquiries about options. I've had several offers. I've only taken one. And at that point, only about 1% of books that are optioned for film ever become a film. So it's extremely difficult. You guys know of The Martian, I'm sure. That was a self-publishing, that started off actually Andy Weir publishing on his website, and then became a bestseller on Amazon, then became a New York Times bestseller, and it becoming a movie. So that's less than 1%. I don't even know. So I guess let me ask you guys this. I have the top 10 tips that I do for new authors, or I have time for questions. What do you guys want to do?
Top 10.
Top 10? Okay. So the top one for me is with writing. You write the best damn book that you can write. And that is your number one goal. I did not do this, partly because I didn't know what I was doing and it was a hobby for me at the time. But now I work constantly. I have a huge editing team, content editor, multiple proofreaders, beta readers, and then more proofreaders. Because I learned my lesson with orbs. So that's the number one thing. Oops. Number two, figure out how you want to publish then, and research what you want to do. Don't take my word for everything today, because my experience might not be the same as your experience. My goals might be different than yours. So figure out what your goals are. If you want to just get your book into readers, then chances are traditional publishing is going to be, self-publishing is going to be your best bet. There's even Wattpad. I have a friend that's a Wattpad star. And so if that's your goal, that's great. But figure out what it is, and then figure out if you want to query agents, and research your agents as well. Next thing, be resourceful. Research your genre. This is number 3. And we've already kind of talked about this, so I'm going to move on to number 4. So I call it dress for success, just like in school. Make sure you have a good cover. That's going to be the first thing people see. I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about this, so I won't beat that point. Polish your product. Again, editors. I really do believe in quality of work. I think it sells way longer when you have better reviews on Amazon. My Extinction Cycle, that's another reason I think it sold so well, because the sequels, almost all the sequels, 2 through 7, have a 5-star rating on Amazon with thousands of reviews. And that's partly because I spent so much time researching the science and with editing. So investment is number 6. I believe in spending money to make money, even if you're losing money in the short run. So you might not have a lot of money to spend, just like I didn't at the time, but I took a big risk and it paid off. I know it's scary, but The only way, honestly, to make money self-publishing is by investing money. I have some clients that are just not willing to do that, and it's just really difficult if you're not running any ads at all. And one author told me he was really frustrated why his books weren't selling, and I asked him what he was doing, and he said absolutely nothing. And that's why. I mean, you cannot have a breakaway success these days. It's almost impossible. Maybe I remember some book covers that were crazy bad back in the day that did become bestsellers. But I think I'm not an expert, but anyone that you talk to that's had sort of my level of success will tell you that just doesn't happen anymore. So time management's number 7. Make sure that you're not on social media all day. Number 8, building a brand. Like I said, my readers have really helped propel my books too, and building a brand is probably one of the most important things you can do because your brand will carry you. I also believe in a positive brand. I don't believe in spending time arguing with people online, or I built my entire brand on being a positive person like I am in real life and being nice to people. And I love my readers. I'm very good to my readers. I always do swag and giveaways, and I think that has really helped my brand too. My readers, I think some of them look at me as a friend, and I look at them as a friend too. Be humble. That's what's kind of hard for me today, to talk about my numbers, because normally I don't, but definitely be humble. I see authors doing some pretty dumb stuff on social media, and I'll leave it at that. 10, spend your time writing. I mean, really, all this other stuff is extra, but again, it goes back to number 1. Write the best book that you can write, and if you put the other pieces together, you're going to have success. I guarantee you, if you do some of the things I talk about today, you will have success. So in closing, my ultimate goal is the same as most authors, to have my books in digital, audio, and bookshelves. There isn't anything I can think of that's much better than that. Publishing is continuing to evolve every day, providing endless possibilities for authors to bring their stories to life. Ultimately, I believe that Bob Mayer was right when he told me that being a hybrid author is one of the best routes to success in publishing. Thank you guys for listening to me today.